Welcome, fashionistas. I'm Sofi. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to knock off a t-shirt. Usually when there's a need to knock off a garment, which is a common practice in production, they use different methods to do so. There are different ways of knocking off a garment. One can be tracing the garment. Another one can be tracing with a plastic over the garment. Another way of knocking off will be placing a piece of fabric on the garment which is sitting on the form and with the chalk knocking off. And simply you can draft it by looking at the garment, measuring and drafting. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways of knocking off this simple t-shirt. The best surface to knock off a garment is the corkboard. Why? Because we can secure the garment with the push pin on the board so it doesn't move while we copy it. But if we don't have a corkboard, we can simply use a piece of paper. So as I said, we're going to need a piece of paper, put on the corkboard. At the middle of the paper, we draft a straight line, and then we need to find the center of this t-shirt as well. Okay, in order for me to find the middle of this garment, I can fold it like this, okay, where the shoulders are matching and underarms are matching and the highest point of the shoulder is matching. Also, this is the highest point of the shoulder. And when we get the fold nicely done, we're going to place some pins at the middle of this garment. As you can see, I put that line previously I mentioned about on the paper, and then my pinned line at the middle of the garment is sitting precisely on that line, and then I slightly straightened up, I didn't stretch, straightened up the highest point of the shoulder, pinned it, and then the shoulder reach and underarm point and the hemline. So the pattern of this garment is as straight as it can go. Then what I need to do is, as I mentioned before, we can use different types of knocking off. So I mentioned by tracing, and also I mentioned tracing some other way that I'm going to present for you. The tracing wheel that we use usually looks like this, because this is the production tracing wheel. And pretty much what I have to do is I am tracing the back neckline, seam line I mean, so this is my back neck, and then I can trace the front neckline, the shoulder, or the shoulder can be marked just with a pencil right now, because it's it allows you to mark it with a pencil if you wanted to. For instance, I could simply go, instead of tracing, I could just mark it with a pencil, and at the edge of the seam I will do like a cross, which shows the direction of my shoulder seam and the seam that goes into the armhole. And now here I will start from outside of that line and simply copy the armhole curve like that. And again, the outline of the garment can be marked with a pencil if I wanted to, or I could trace it again past the line and make a cross, and here is my hemline that I could mark it with a tracing wheel or with my pencil. Before we remove the t-shirt from the board, I would like to show you another way of tracing this garment, the pattern. Okay, so I can use thin plastic, any type of plastic, like dry cleaners plastic or any plastic you have available. What you can do, put the plastic over the garment, secure it so it doesn't shift and move. Again, as I mentioned, if you don't have a cork board, you can do this on a paper. And I'm going to get my plastic again as flat as I can without distorting it. Or you can even take the push pin off and pin everything together. That's a possibility also, like this. And like this. I'm gonna make this one straight also. Then you take a permanent marker and you can copy. That's my back neckline. This is my front neckline, and you can use even finer tip of marker to get that line as thin and clean as possible. And should not forget to mark the center of my garment. Now let's take it off of the board. Okay, here's my pattern, pretty much, if I'm using this technique of copying. Let's say if I want to copy this, and if I placed my paper, the center front matching with the center front, sometimes we can see it, or we can just place it on top of it and copy it any way we want to. All we have to do is just add the seam allowance to this pattern. Okay, so now I want also to mention that if you didn't have a tracing wheel, this technique of making the pattern would be working very nicely. So let's keep on going with the traced pattern so you can see it being finished. As you have seen, I copied only half of the garment, and I copied front and back at the same time on top of each other. That is going to be separated later on. Okay, let's draft. The center back neckline should be 90 degree. The center front should be 90 degree as well, meaning it's a straight line at the center back, straight line at the center front. Then I'm going to place my ruler, one of my lines of the ruler, into this corner and create that 90 degree line, and the front also. Then I'm going to place my French curve on this line and draft the back neckline, and my front neckline is going to be drafted like this. So you can see that at the highest point of the shoulder, HBS, highest point of the shoulder connects both necklines together. Then the shoulder seam is a straight line. I know my hand was most probably shaking. That's why the line is a little bit shaky, but I have to use my straight ruler. I know that it's a straight line. I can use any of the rulers that I have, either the French curve or even a hip curve, because this t-shirt armhole is a little bit dropped, so it has this kind of shape. You can get your curve, and you can even move your curve a couple of times until you get the marked line. Here, one, and I would pull it back and draft my armhole like this. So that's my armhole line. Now my shoulder seam can be straight or curvy. I don't know what kind of t-shirt you need to copy. Let's assume my t-shirt was slightly curvy. I would be using my hip curve again to draft that very slight curve, or I can use my straight ruler to draft that line into a straight side seam. So whichever the case is, you can just use your rulers accordingly. Then here, this is a straight line, and again, if one of my lines is matching with my straight line here, I'm going to be drafting 90 degree because this is a straight hemline. I can fold my pattern in half at the center grain line like this. And I'm going to staple my papers so they wouldn't move and twist. Before I cut, I would like to add my seam allowances and hem allowance. Usually for the seam allowances, they use either a 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, depending how many threads of overlock they're going to be using. This particular one is using 5 thread overlock. That means the hem seam allowance is pretty wide. They would be using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. In that case, once I find out that information, I'm going to be adding 3/8 of an inch. Again, you can use 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. The good thing is that for knits, they use the same seam allowance for necklines, for shoulders, for side seams, for everything. Okay, here at the shoulder, I have 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Here I'm missing a little piece of paper that I'm going to add later on. So then 3/8 of an inch here at the armhole. And then 3/8 of an inch at the side seam. Now, the hem allowance is most probably 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so let's add that also. 3/4 of an inch hem allowance here. Okay, then I'm going to fix the curves, make them into continuous nice lines. It's ready to be cut now, but before I cut, I need to add notches. Notches are different for the knits and laces than on woven fabrics. What we need to do is, for the front or the back, we have to go from the seam line, and by walking on the seam line, mark the 3-inch point. So here's my 3-inch point. On this 3-inch point line, you can make a little notch like this, mountain notch, that's what they call. And for the front, center front, I am going to be making very similar notch, single notch and single notch, which means a front. At the center back, actually I drafted my castle notch, which is half of it right now. When you open up, it will be a total notch that you can see later. But at the neckline, here at the back neckline, I also added 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then on top of that is sitting my castle notch. So I will cut the back neckline. So I'm not going to cut the front yet. I'm just cutting as if I was cutting only for the back. Okay, let's cut the pattern at the center. So this will be my back pattern, and this one will be my front pattern. And here all I need to do is simply cut my front line like this. Okay, so by doing this, I will have both sides of my patterns. I'm getting ready to knock off the sleeve of the shirt, and I'm going to use the same logic of copying that I did for the front and back, making a grain line, now taking the middle of the sleeve like this, and I'm going to place the sleeve middle fold precisely on the line, and I'm going to push pin the sleeve into place. Okay, so I pinned the middle fold of my sleeve against the straight line on the paper, and I push pinned everything. Here I copy my lines with a pencil wherever I can, but wherever I can't, I'm going to be using my tracing wheel. I am seeing my seam line right here. Your t-shirt doesn't have to have this kind of complicated finish. You can make a hemline later on and fold and stitch. Now here I am at the cap. Again, I'm going to start from outside of the cap, so I put that information down on the paper and try to be mindful of the curve of the sleeve, which mostly goes outwards curve, then inwards curve. For even extra large t-shirts, this will be lesser curve, but pay attention on the type of a curve that you have and work with it. After I copy this, I am going to remove my sleeve off of the board. I mean, if you wanted to do with the plastic, you could simply, again, put the plastic over this, pin it just the same way I demonstrated before, and copy the sleeve that way. So here's the shape that I came up with, and I'm going to use my French curve to draft my curve. First of all, at the cap, I have a straight line. Usually we do have a straight line right at the top. And from here, I am going to place my French curve and draft this line going down like this, and then flip over and draft your cap. You see, knocking off is making shortcut patterns because you're not going through complicated steps to create this pattern from scratch, but simply you copy what you see. And the t-shirt is such a garment that you cannot do that many mistakes because it's a simple, very basic pattern. Here my line came up curvy in here, but that happened because this rib knit is stitched to the edge. That's why it made it curvy. I am going to make my line straight. Let's say most probably that line could be like this, or if I push this up, I will be going, let's say, straight up like that. I'm going to just catch the underseam's edge and draft. Now, it could be straight, or I can do like a slight curve if I want to. Let's say another way of drafting it could be like this and like this. I guess I like this latest one better. Let it be slightly curvy line, like a cap sleeve. Then I'm going to erase this straight line. But if you wanted to make like a style change, you could do it too. So after I'm done with the sleeve, now I have to make sure that this cap is matching with my armhole before I finalize it. I measure my armhole, let's say like this. You just walk. Let's assume my armhole is 9.5 inches long. My front is like that too. So since this is my half of the cap, it should be slightly bigger than 9.5. So let's measure. Measure it from the outside, please. So or you can hold with a pencil here to come up with the correct measurement. Now, my cap is 9 3/4, which is perfect. That means I didn't distort my pattern because my armhole is 9 1/2. I want my sleeve to be a little bit bigger, like 1/2 inch in total. That's why I added 1/4 inch on this side, and 1/4 inch will be added when I fold my paper on the other side. So if, let's say, if it was not enough, it was wrong, I will add it here and I will go like this. That will add my cap. You see? It will go like 1/4 inch out. So here's what I would do. I will add my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here, also on my cap. And 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here under arm. Here I'm going to do 3/4 of an inch hem allowance, just the way I did for my t-shirt front and back. Or you can do a little less, 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so before I cut my paper, I need to smooth my line on the cap. Now we're going to fold at the center and again staple it. Okay, at the underarm, I'm going to mark my notch. Let's pretend that this is the back side of my sleeve, so 3 inches up. I'm going to mark 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch wide space, and I'm going to draft my castle notch because this side represents my back, and I'm going to develop my front notch over the other side. I am going to fold my hemline up because it's a tapered shape and I need some extra fabric in here, so I'm going to redraft the line right on top of it so I can see here. And after holding the fold like that, we're going to cut the under seam allowance just like that, where you can see you come up with this kind of funny shape, but that gives you enough fabric, so when you stitch and fold it up, you have enough fabric to occupy that space. And then after we do that, I come to the upper part here where I drafted little mountain notch, which is 1/8 of an inch wide because it's folded and 1/4 inch up, so it's like a triangular shape. Okay, so then we're going to cut the sleeve cap. So when I open up, my pattern looks like this. So this is the back side of my sleeve. I'm just marking for myself to see which one is which. And this is my front. I'm going to make a little mountain notch here also, which is 1/4 inch at the base and 1/4 inch high. Little mountain shape notch, triangular shaped notch, which is like this. Okay, so that will be in my front. Sometimes they would carve a little bit from the front. Let's say they would go a little bit from 0, going 1/4 inch and going to 0 at this side for the front. If that's what I was doing, I could be bringing my notch down here, and then my line will go down there. Usually the front is a little bit smaller here than the back, but if you feel like your armholes are the same and your sleeve curves are the same, you can keep them the same, whichever way you want to. Here, I just did that extra step so you can see that extra step being done also there. So if I was going to look at my pattern, you could see my front is a little bit carved here underarm. So that is my sleeve. Now I need to draft my neckband for you. I'm going to show you how to cut this rib knit for the neckline. I'm going to walk on my front neckline. Let's say this measures 6 3/8. 6 3/8 on this side and 6 3/8 on the other side is going to give me 12 3/4. 12 3/4 total. And let's measure the back neckline also. So the back neckline, again, I'm measuring on the seam line, okay, not seam allowance line. So my seam line is supposed to be 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. So that's what I'm measuring. So here I came up with 4 3/4, 4 3/4. Again, double it up, the other side, folded side. It will be 9 1/2. So my completely total rib knit length should be calculated. So 12 3/4 plus 9 1/2 would be 'So the total length of my neckband or neck circumference, as you will, is 22 1/4. The rib knit on the neckline is cut shorter than that number. Why? Because it should be gathering all the neckline and keeping it together. In some cases, they would minus 2 inches, or in some cases they will minus 3 inches. Depends from the stretchiness of the neckband or the quality or the type of the fabric that they're using. So let's do this. So my neckband, I found out, is going to be 20 inches long. Here on this drafted line, I'm going to measure 20 inches. So this is going to be, say, 1.5 neckband. So the width is going to be 1.5 inches. So this, actually this neckband can be made out of rib knit or the same fabric that you have cut on a cross grain. So then this is my 20-inch line. So that's that. Here. So this will be my neckband. Obviously, I need to add seam allowances to this. Again, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to be stitched to the neck. Now, I need to know where the opening is going to be. You see on this t-shirt, the opening is at the shoulder. On some t-shirts, the opening is at the center back. You can put anywhere you want to. My neckband is 20 inches long. Now I need to decide how much of that neckline is going to be given to the back and how much is going to be given to the front. What I would suggest you to do is you are going to take, let's say, total of your back neckline, which was 9.5, minus 1 inch. Okay, that will be your back neckline, 8.5, and the rest, which is 11.5, that will be minus from 12 3/4. Because the front is longer, we minus 1.25 inches from the front measurement. So that way I would know this much is going to be stitched to the back neckline and that much is going to be stitched at the front neckline. Let's cut the rib knit pattern, please. Here I already marked my mountain notches here, so I would know exactly where the shoulder seam is. And another thing you could do, in order for you not to have a hard time also stitching the front, you see this is my front side and this is my back. I also placed the mountain notch right at the middle of the front, so I will stitch it to the front, center front notch that I have on my pattern. You could create the same notches on the opposite side also by simply folding your pattern like this and cutting together, or copying the notch on the other side just the way you want to. Let's say if I fold it like this, okay, so my other notch is going to be right here, and my other notch is going to be right there. I have to definitely add that in t-shirt production, the rib knit tape is calculated, measured by the machine automatically and stitched around the neckline without any notches. But if they cut out of a fabric, most probably notches would be needed. So different companies are using different techniques of doing this. The reason I did this notches meticulously for you is because I want you to understand what part of that piece is going to be stitched to what part of the neckline. This will conclude my demonstration of knocking off a simple t-shirt for you. See you next time.